Hi. Previously, we talked about how to approach advantages-disadvantages essay, which was a pretty straightforward task. If you missed that one, here's a link for you. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit more complex and more interesting. I'm going to teach you an approach which I like to call the devil's advocate, or the lesser of two evils. This is a good approach for when you are presented with a topic that on the surface looks very clear-cut. There is the wrong answer and the right answer. However, if you demonstrate that you're able to look at the problem from both sides, this is definitely going to boost your task achievement score. So, let's see what we've got here. The topic goes as follows. Using fossil fuels causes too many environmental problems. This is totally unacceptable as there are other forms of energy available. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? This type of task is very easy to spot. The exam designers are using very divisive language. Adjectives like unacceptable or there are too many environmental problems. So on the surface, it looks like they are urging you to agree with the statement. And the easiest thing to do is to agree, which is not a problem, by the way. If you want to agree with that and support your opinion, that's totally fine. My goal today is to teach you a more nuanced approach. So let's brainstorm what we might talk about here. I'm going to start with the arguments against. So the first thing that comes to mind is something like the statement that our world, our civilization relies on fossil fuels, on oil and gas too much to suddenly stop using it. Basically, every industry, every type of consumer goods, any service, if you track the chain of supply, at one point you're going to come across using fossil fuels. So our world relies on fossil fuels too much. Remember, this is just the brainstorm stage, so we're not developing our argument. So, the first argument against is that our world relies on fossil fuels too much. The second argument against that comes to my mind is that, yes, there are renewable sources, but they aren't nearly as efficient or widespread as using oil and gas. So, renewable sources aren't as efficient or widespread. And we might develop it, but again, this is just the brainstorming stage. Let's imagine ourselves in the shoes of someone who agrees with the statement. Or perhaps you originally agreed with the statement, so it's going to be easy for you. We all heard about oil spills in the ocean, which are an enormous disaster, man-made disaster at that. So I'm going to write something like oil spills cause water pollution and kill sea animals. Right? Turtles and birds and coral reefs, all of those creatures suffer because some oil tanker suddenly got a leak. Now, another argument would be something like our own health. Our lungs suffer from car fumes. That is, of course, a result of burning fossil fuels. So let's say car fumes poison our air, which leads to respiratory diseases. Right? So, you could leave it at that. It would be a well thought through plan. Of course, if you stop here, you will need to write an appropriate introduction and conclusion where you would summarize your points and you would express your own opinion, saying something like, I'm not sure I can choose the side here. I'm not sure that I agree with the statement because there are good arguments for and against, so I'm, going to be on the fence on that one. However, if we take it one step further and add one more paragraph in the body part, we're going to show a much better understanding of how to build an argument. So this little neat trick that I'm going to show you is a yes, but linker. Right, yes, but is your bridge that's going to, this is where you're going to counter your opponent's arguments. What that means is, how would we potentially argue with the fact that oil spills cause water pollution and kill sea animals? This is true, right? And it would be silly to say, well, you know what? It's not true. If it's not true, why did you choose the argument in the first place, right? So we will have to take the devil's advocate approach and imagine that, yes, there is some evil, but the alternative is worse. So by continuing to use fossil fuels, we're choosing the lesser of the evils. And this is why using fossil fuels is justified. Now, let's imagine what used to be the main source of energy before the petroleum industry started, being widespread. This was whale oil and coal, right? Whale oil that was used for lamps and as a lubricant for a lot of the Industrial Revolution machinery, nearly brought sperm whales to distinction in the 19th, 20th century, as far as I remember. So imagine that we suddenly stop using fossil fuels. Does it mean that every country is going to suddenly start using renewable wind and hydroelectric power? Of course not. The absolute majority of countries haven't been investing heavily in technology like that. And most of the countries aren't going to survive and aren't going to cover their energy needs if they stop burning fossil fuels, right? So what we could say is that burning fossil fuels is justified in this point of history. We just don't have a choice because the alternative, the bigger evil is what? Returning to less humane and even worse practices. Oil spills cause water pollution and kill sea animals. Yes, that's true. But the alternative is using whale oil, which, requires killing whales, which is inhumane, cruel, and can bring these beautiful animals to extinction. So the alternative is using whale oil, which is a cruel practice. And because most countries don't have the technology to cover their energy needs at this point, they are likely to get back to this inhumane practice. This is what the devil's advocate would say. Let's think about coal. Is coal environmentally friendly? No. A lot of children were employed in coal mines. People who regularly work with burning coal suffer from respiratory diseases as well. And coal is probably going to be used as the main source of energy if we suddenly stopped using fossil fuels. Because again, most of the countries, apart from a very, very small minority, are going to require coal, right? So let's say same with coal, that is even more harmful, let's say, for our respiratory systems. I'm not sure about that, by the way, but it's harmful, that's for sure. So what we've done is we've come up with counter arguments for these two agree arguments that were our opponents' arguments. So what we did effectively is presented our own opinion in the disagree section. We presented our opponents' opinions, our opponents' arguments that sound very logical, that sound very legit, right? We can't say that this is a straw man argument. And then using this little yes but link, we present counter arguments that show that we're able to look at the problem from both sides. Now, speaking of this structure and this approach, we don't necessarily have to write 3 paragraphs. Let me show you another example, how you can use this lesser evil approach for only 2. All right. So here I have another topic that seems very clear-cut. We're invited to agree. Smoking, it reads, has been proven to be extremely unhealthy. Of course it has. Some people argue that tobacco production should be banned. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Now again, on the surface, it looks like we're invited to agree. Of course, we want people to stop being addicted to tobacco. Of course, we want the big cigarette, the companies that produce tobacco to stop exploiting underprivileged workers. Of course, we want this. Of course, we want that. Of course, we want everyone to be happy. But let's see what the devil's advocate has to say about that. So, what you could do in this situation while you're brainstorming is to start with the point of view of your opponent. In this case, this is going to be agree. So your opponent is going to agree with the statement, and then later will dismantle their arguments. All right, what comes to mind is smoking is addictive. So, if the tobacco production goes down, plummets even, the price is going to go up, right? It's only logical. Fewer people are going to be able to afford cigarettes, and well, hopefully, most of them will quit then, right? So let's see. If tobacco production plummets, prices will go up. Therefore, fewer people will be able to afford the cigarettes and quit, hopefully. Sounds logical, doesn't it? What else could we say? In some developing countries, a lot of communities are employed by big tobacco companies, and they're often underpaid. They often have to suffer terrible conditions, no regulations about their labor. They're basically slaves. What if we stop this horrible practice? Well, they are not going to be slaves anymore. So let's write it like this. A lot of people employed by the tobacco companies and treated unfairly are going to be free, right? There's going to be no company that oppresses them. Now, let's think what a devil's advocate would have to say about it. So, if cigarette prices go up, most people will quit only in a perfect world, which we don't live in, right? Some people will, for sure, but others are going to switch to harder drugs or start drinking more. Alcohol sales are going to go up. Others, because they're so addicted and unable to quit, they're just gonna spend more money, perhaps depriving their children or families of some necessities, right? So letting them pay a small price for their addiction is probably the lesser of the evils. Does it make sense? It does in my book. So let's write it like this. Some people will quit, but some people will quit, but others will switch to harder drugs or start spending more money on their addiction, possibly foregoing necessities. Another way how it could backfire is that because there are no licensed tobacco products, people are going to start smoking lesser quality product, things that might or might not be poisonous, for example, products that which quality isn't being checked by anyone, which might lead to death even. So tobacco companies also have quality control that protects their consumers from too big of a harm to their health, Of course, smoking cigarettes is detrimental, but they need their consumers, so they are checking for at least most horrible, harmful stuff. So, tobacco companies also have quality control, and without it, people might start smoking even less safe cigarettes. Right? So this is our counter argument for this one, for the first one. Now, what can we say to counter the second argument? Yes, this is true that a lot of people who are employed at the lowest positions in the companies are treated unfairly. Some of them even have to work in inhumane conditions. But, says the devil's advocate, tobacco companies pay enormous amounts of taxes, right? They also provide an enormous number of workplaces for people all over the world. Isn't it something good about them? What's gonna happen to the people who suddenly lose their jobs and are unable to support their family? What's gonna happen to the people who, yes, they work in cruel conditions, but they do have work. Working there puts bread on their table. What happens if we take it away without, proper plan to reemploy them? So let's put it into writing. So tobacco companies pay taxes that can be used for education, healthcare, science, etc., etc. In good hands, of course. And secondly, tobacco companies are very important global employers. So if we suddenly close them, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Lots of people are going to lose their jobs. This is it. So remember that whichever paragraph you end with is basically your opinion. So what we've done here is we presented the opinion we disagree with, our opponent's opinion, and then we explained why it's stupid. Okay, not stupid, but we explained why we disagreed with them. And this is basically it. As I said, this is a very useful tactic for topics that look very straightforward, very clear cut. And if you employ it, you might get an extra half a point or even a point for your task achievement. We've spent almost half an hour doing that, but at the exam, you will have 3 to 5 minutes to plan your future essay and to brainstorm your ideas. So my suggestion is that you practice as much as possible using this approach and other approaches that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, to be prepared and not to lose your head at the exam. That's it for today. I'll see you next time.